And we're back. My name is Paul John Dykes, as you know, and today I am joined by Sean Connolly, who is becoming a familiar face, particularly when a Celtic State of Mind and Celtic Down Under collaborate, and that happens quite a lot for the big game. Sean, how are you feeling over in Australia?
Not going to lie, Paul, I am sweating. It's 34 here today. I've had to turn my aircon off so that the drone is not on this matchday coverage. But apart from that, going well.
No, tremendous. It's great that you can join us. What time is it in your time zone?
It's 8 p.m.
8 p.m. You're tuning in for the big one. It's our first live show of the new year. You might have been tuning in to some of the pre-records over the Christmas and New Year period. We'll start off today, and we will be having a minute's silence at the end of the show for Frank McGarvey, who very, very sadly passed away. The news was broke yesterday by a couple of his family members, and obviously the tributes have started flooding in. There's going to be a 1 minute silence before today's game, rightfully so. And just let's remember Frank today, because he's a guy who he scored many a goal against Rangers, many an important goal for Celtic. One of an elite band of footballers, Sean, who have scored over 100 goals for the club. And I was very lucky to get to know Frank because Acsom sponsored the Old Boys and he was the manager. And it was just great fun. Really, really sad to hear of his passing, wasn't it?
Yeah, he's a legend, and that's why people like you and I, I don't know about yourself, but I never seen him play in the flesh, but you know well of him because of what he did for Celtic. He had a big reputation, even though, so he's kind of, his reputation stayed after he retired. And there'll be players that come and go in Celtic folklore throughout that happens to. So like my daughter is 3, for example, and she'll probably know who Henrik Larsson was in the same way that we know who Frank McGarvey was, but she'll never know who Michu or Dion Dublin are. So McGarvey is very much an esteemed player for Celtic, or was, I should say.
You're spot on. People come and go. This is what happens at a football club, and players in particular come and go. But Frank left his mark, and I've seen some amazing tributes from people who knew, played with him, played against him, and very, very sad day, particularly when you, as I say, you consider some of the times that he gave to Celtic fans, and I think he brought that home when he came onto the pitch just recently, because he was talking about making the Celtic fans happy. And I'll never forget, just before my time actually, Sean, but I'll never forget the 85 Cup final with my dad coming home from the game, and he'd been there with the uncles and the cousins and all that kind of stuff. And the joy that he gave so many people over the world. And I think Frank realised that. And I think that, he spoke about it when he went on the park. So let's keep Frank in our memories. Let's keep his memory alive as we enter a big, big game today. It's Glasgow Derby Day, and the teams are out. I'm pretty sure anyone of a Celtic state of mind will be well aware of the team, but let's have a look at it anyway, because there's a couple of surprises in there and we'd like to discuss them. Let us know your thoughts, because we've been talking about it all week. And on Friday, I've got to give a big shout out, because it's great, Sean, when people get things wrong and we can have a right good giggle at them. But Lawrence Conley called James Forrest starting on Friday on the bulletin with myself and Brian, and he was lambasted in the comments. The YouTube comments, the live comments, the big fella got it tight. And there he is, James Forrest starting on the right. What do you make of that lineup?
I didn't do it quite as publicly as Lawrence, but that is the front 3 that I would have picked. It's funny because if you're basing it on talent, you'd say that Forrest and Maeda are maybe 4th and 5th choice amongst the wingers behind Jota, Abada and Haksabanovic. But if you're going on form for the last 3 weeks, that's your number 1 and 2 there, is Forrest and Maeda. And not just for being on form in an attacking sense, but also you would imagine that those two have the best defensive nous of our available wingers. I also noticed that Ange subtle low-key dropped in after the last game that Jota's carrying some sort of injury that didn't really get picked up on, and I'm not sure, so I don't know why he's on the bench but also somehow injured. I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but I'm actually quite happy to see Maeda is absolutely firing, so I've put a cheeky bet on him as an anytime goal scorer.
Oh, hey, by the way, I would not bet against them, particularly after that goal the other night. Now, there's loads of great comments coming through. Keep them coming. There's a few, I don't know, maybe eyebrows raised by some. Certainly Sean would have picked Forest, as would Lawrence. The lineup that I was putting out this morning, I had Abada starting on the right-hand side, and I had Juranovic starting at right back. But this is the thing as well, Sean, like you've just mentioned there with Jota, you're never 100% sure of the actual fitness. You expect that if someone's in the squad or on the bench, they're 100%. It's not always the case. So is Juranovic 100% yet? Who knows? I think the first thing we're going to talk about after I get a few of these comments up is the debut of Alistair Johnston at right back. Ewan Boy Martin comes in to wish us all a happy new year. A happy new year to every single one of you. It's a great, time of the year to refresh, reset, and get on with all those New Year resolutions starting today at Ibrox. Richard Coleman comes in. Forest over Abada. Sorry, Ange. Wrong choice. Unless playing the long 60-minute change game. Well, I think we'll come to the Forest decision, but I'm thinking of some of the big games where Abada's not really shown up. And, Forest has been through a Glasgow derby time and time again. He knows this game inside out. It's very much like in the European games. If Forest had started one of those, it might have raised some eyebrows, but you would have understood why Ange would do it, because he's so experienced. And this brings us right up to Johnston's inclusion at right back. Ned Flanders, big test for Johnston today. And we were talking earlier about making your debut in a Glasgow derby. And some of the ones that we came up with, you can add to this, Sean, if I've missed any. It was noted that Johan Mjalby made his debut in a 5-1 win in 1998, which is remembered for the phenomenal goals of Lubomir Moravcik. Sean Maloney made his debut for Celtic in 2001 in a Glasgow derby. Peter Grant, going further back, 1984. Juninho, probably his best performance in a Celtic jersey, came against Rangers in 2004. And here's one for the aficionados. Scott Marshall played against Rangers in 1999 in a 3-0 defeat. What's your thoughts on making your debut in a game like this?
It's very interesting because, as you said, Juninho did absolutely peak in that first game. I don't know what happened to him after that. We all thought we'd absolutely won a watch. I was at that game at Celtic Park. And Maloney could have had a goal, but he let Larsson score it in making his debut at Ibrox. And I would also chuck one in as a player who only played maybe a dozen or so games for us, and his absolute best game, without any question, I would say, it was Bolly Bolingoli. So his best performance in a Celtic shirt, if he has any, was at Ibrox as well. So I think there's something about that kind of occasion that some players rise to and some players shrink, and the ones that do rise, they might never rise again. But that is certainly something that can be a chastening experience, and we'll certainly learn something about the character, if not the ability of Alistair Johnston today.
For sure. When I seen the lineup, and the fact Juranovic was on the bench, I did think to myself, is he just short in match fitness? Because very much like the Forest scenario, albeit not as many games, not as many performances against Rangers, I thought Juranovic knows this fixture, and I think that counts for a lot. Is there a normalisation, though, Sean, when you hear Ange talking about games against Rangers, he's talking about, it doesn't matter what the point difference is, etc. Is he normalising it? Is he saying to Alistair Johnston, yeah, it's a big game, but, let's keep the head, let's acquit ourselves properly? I remember talking to some players who have been, featured in this fixture in the past, and it was all about keeping your head, ensuring that you didn't get involved in, sometimes it's the Frank McAvenny situation, for example, when he signs in 87 and he gets involved and he gets sent off, and it's not getting caught up in the emotions of the occasion. Do you think that's what Ange is all about, trying to normalise it for Johnston?
100%. He'll just be saying it's another game. We play our football. Yeah, we're playing a better class of opposition than we're used to. Despite what you may want to say about Sevco, they are the second best team in Scotland, and they're only 6 months away from having played in a European final. We went very recently, went through 2.5 years without managing to beat them across 7 games, interrupted by COVID. So, you do have to well, having to respect that we're playing a higher class of opposition, you do also, if you start to make adjustments based on the magnitude of the game, then that might actually be a psychological burden to the players who are going to be out there. So it's a whether it's the best way to do it or not, it's definitely something that a tactic that he's playing in the psychological game. And I think, correct, don't know if you'll agree with me or not, but thinking back, I believe Martin O'Neill was one for every time a Celtic Rangers game came around, he would always go with his tried, trusted favourites, kind of regardless of what their form or injury status was going into the game. Alan Thompson kind of always got dropped in, Chris Sutton, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a great point actually, because if you were to, select a team based on form and you get into the midfield, that might not be the midfield that you would select, and we'll talk about it. So I think that's a great point, because Forrest, it's like what we were talking before. Forrest just he knows you can just slot him in to this occasion. It's not going to overwhelm him as the big occasion has overwhelmed Abada a few times, Real Madrid being one of the big occasions this season. It's not going to overwhelm him. You know what you're going to get. And if indeed he's not really in the game, you've got a fantastic option on the bench there. You mentioned Haksabanovic. It's a bit disappointing that in the last few weeks, Sean, he's been in and out of the squads, isn't it? I mean, I think it wasn't so much an injury, it was illness that kept him out a few times, and he's not made the bench. I find it a very interesting bench as well. Some of the great points coming through from the commenter. Stephen Sloan initially says, I never enjoy watching these matches. So much on the line. My heart can't take it. We should win today, but form goes out the window with these games. Hopefully we get the win for Frank. Rest in peace. Yeah, our thoughts will be with Frank McGarvey throughout today's game. There was a fantastic clip actually put out by the club where it was showing you some of his goals, Sean. Absolutely sensational goals. And the players that played alongside him, like Charlie Nicholas and Brian McClare, who scored a lot of goals, George McCluskey, who scored a lot of goals because of Frank McGarvey's work rate. And when you're talking a work rate, one player springs to my mind in that Celtic team, and it's Maeda. So he's had there's been a real arc in Maeda's season this season. He was getting a bit of criticism, getting a bit of flack. He wasn't at his best, absolutely not. Goes to the World Cup, and a few eyebrows were raised when he was selected, when Hatate and Kyogo weren't selected for Japan. But since he's come back, he's been a revelation, and in particular at Easter Road the other night. Fantastic performance. There was no way you couldn't play him today, I thought.
Yeah, he was great. He's absolutely on form, and all of our players that were the World Cup have came back on absolutely firing. I'm guessing with the confidence of being there, and I'm hoping maybe Alistair Johnson is going to be the same today. That might be something that's kind of played in. The other thing I was kind of thinking about is what, if you're basing it on form in these games, in the 5 games we played last calendar year in 2022, we scored 11 goals, and 5 of those goals were from Abada and Jota, who are currently sitting on the bench. We didn't so you could argue they should be starting on that basis, that they have the experience of snatching Borna Barisic's soul from his body, but also those goals all came at Celtic Park, if I'm correct on that one, I believe. So there might actually be an aspect of the venue being taken into account here rather than the opposition, if that makes sense.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, and again, we're going back to not only form, but performances of certain individuals against certain teams or venues. And then, sometimes, for example, Samaras was a big game player, Sean. You knew that you could play him in the big matches against Barcelona, Rangers, and he would perform. Whereas Tuesday night at Ross County might not fancy it. So I can understand some of the comments coming in relation to what have been called strange by Plunge McNugget. Johnson is no in for Juranovic, Forrest in for Abada. Strange, let's hope it works. And I think it's right down to this fixture and all the different elements that we've been discussing. We'll keep the team up because there's plenty more to discuss. But in terms of that defence, starting with Hart, Carter Vickers, Starfelt and Taylor, absolutely no surprises. And Carter Vickers and Starfelt in the last few weeks have shown that they are, at the moment, by far and away, the best partnership we've got in the central area of defence as well, Sean.
Those two are definitely the best at supporting the the overall team style of play. And everyone that's listened to me before will know that I give it to Starfelt tight for not being able to use his left foot. But he is a very aggressive defender, which absolutely is necessary for the style of football we play. Because when we play the high press, teams tend to go direct. And Carter Vickers and Starfelt are the two best defenders we have at attacking that ball in the air. So that when teams do go direct out of necessity, we are not giving them a chance to breathe in that from that long ball. So I see that's the kind of tactic today. But my concern is that with that kind of aggressive defending style, that Sevco might actually be buying a lot more free kicks than we would normally be facing in our own defensive half. Because of that, I believe their players may be either just have natural ability or maybe coached to kind of go down and buy free kicks from Scottish referees, is all I'll say on that matter.
Do you have any concerns about, because Ange touched on the fact he doesn't want it to be a talking point. We've said it, many times on Acsom since VAR has been introduced, Sean, that we don't want to talk about it. It's tedious, but it's been implemented so poorly and competently that we've got to talk about it. Can you see it being another issue today?
I think if it's not today, it will be in the next game, because basically every other game has a VAR controversy, so it's a statistical inevitability. It's going to happen at some point, and if it's not today, that's just a statistical anomaly, and it will be a controversy next time. There's refereeing controversies in these games at all times, and VAR is just another type of refereeing controversy, and that's it. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be a controversy no matter what, and VAR is just the new thing that we're getting used to, and different types of controversy around.
Yeah, for sure. Jungle Lion. Nobody would have picked that team last night. Well, obviously, what happens is we're all the same. We've all got WhatsApp groups and we're all sharing information and ideas and theories, etc. But I can honestly say nobody got that team right in relation to the Acsom chat, for sure. And Richard comes back in the 60-minute change is going to be awesome. Well, that is true, because, when you make these decisions and you decide, right, we're going for Maeda on the left and Forrest on the right, then you do have a very strong bench. You've got some very, very strong options. But there's a few other interesting ones in there for me as well, Sean. So Kobayashi is on the bench. He also, like Johnson, could make his debut today. And I find it quite interesting because we've had this conversation around Maurice Jens, and whether or not we're going to keep him. What does that mean for Stephen Welsh? And I'm delighted with the cover we've now got at centre half. It was an issue for the initial stages of Ange Postecoglou's career. We now have options, and the option he's going for is a brand new player in Kobayashi over Jens. I've not heard anything in relation to the fitness of Jens. Do you think that's a big indication as to the future of the player?
He came out, he was talking the other day, he gave an interview where he said his agent is talking with Celtic around about the permanent transfer. And what he also said as part of the interview was I can't remember what it was. He said he was happy, but he added a qualifier, and it was something like, I'm relatively happy, or I'm as happy as I can be, or something like that, kind of implying that he's not fully content, but he kind of likes Celtic and would like to be here. But, I'm just kind of taking the implications from what he said. Yeah, he's not lived up to the early promise he showed, and if I don't know, like, we're getting a bit congested at centre backs, because I believe Iwata can also play there. So yeah, the squad overall is getting a bit congested. So I'd say we're expecting some players to go out, but I don't think right now I don't think 10 minutes before Derby kickoff I could be going into it in much depth.
I loved when Jens came out with the fantastic quotes that we all love as Celtic supporters, where he's pushing all the buttons, but then he drops out. I've been a fan. I've got to say, I've been a fan of Jens, and I felt that we should probably loan out Welsh for the rest of this season, keep Jens in, make a decision at the end of the season, and I don't change my view on that. But Kobayashi on the bench, another brilliant bit of business by Ange Postecoglou. Ange Postecoglou, Ewan Boy Martin, rather, with JJ not starting. That tells us he's definitely going this month. We will see how that one progresses. I'm pretty sure we will keep a hold of him until such times that Tony Ralston's back fit. This is interesting, and we did touch on this during the week, Sean. Green Lichty comes in, Forrest tracks back, a wee bit of cover for Johnson to find his feet. I think that's a great point. So if you're going to play Johnson, you need a wee bit of protection. And I think Forrest, and I think the stats back this up, is much better defensively than Abada.
Yeah, well, definitely better than Abada, and I believe Maeda is very good as well. He seems to consistently be tracking back to see the ball out for for goal kicks and things like that. You're saying cover for Johnson. I mean, we're assuming that Forrest will be on the right and Maeda will be on the left, but there's been times in the recent games, the last few weeks, where they've actually been inverted, and we've had Forrest on the left and Maeda on the right. I actually think they're better that way with Forrest on the right, but yeah, we'll never know. Like, they might switch about during the game as well, so it's hard to say.
It is. It definitely is. Magnet 67. Morning, Acsom team. Happy New Year to the whole Acsom team. I think there's 19 or 20 of us now. Tough game today, but as long as we play our game, our footy, we win. I'll say 3-1 Celtic. Get your suggestions in. What are your score predictions? Now, there's a few other things to discuss, Sean, because Aaron Moy probably played his best game in a Celtic jersey. This is a good time, obviously, to talk about Celtic Down Under. We became pals with you guys during the charity weekend a few years back. And we decided that, on a match day, for example, if we can collaborate together and get the word out about your channel, then obviously what we would hope is that the traffic starts to subscribe to you guys on YouTube and follow you on social media and stuff like that. But also gave us a brilliant insight into, at that time, and it wasn't by design, that we bring in a manager who obviously had made his name in Australian football. And since then, we've brought in Aaron Moy. What was the take on Celtic Down Under when we brought in Moy? Remind me, who was for, who was against?
Well, I was personally against, not severely, but more just if I kind of felt like it was a squad player, aging player kind of decision. Jared was of the same kind of mind, and we didn't have Shane at the time, and Liam's based in Japan, so he was more agnostic on it than the rest of us. So honestly, there wasn't much fanfare. There was more kind of, yes, great, there's an Australian here, but it was more of a, this feels like a downgrade from Tom Rogic / James McCarthy style signing, if in Ange's first season. So there definitely wasn't much fanfare, and that kind of was borne out when Aaron Moy had an absolute shocker when we lost our only domestic game this season against St Mirren. And since then, Postecoglou is not put him back into the number 6 role, save for the final 10 minutes of the odd game. And he's been playing in the more number 8/10 role, and he still has a propensity to be caught in possession. You see that with the yellow card he got against I think it was St Johnstone last week, but then he still had a great game other than that one time he got caught. And then I think the Hibs game midweek was the best game he's played for Celtic, and it was the first time I've actually noticed that he seems to be adjusting to the intensity of the game, and he said that himself in an interview where he said that the intensity did surprise him, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's the reason why, despite being our form midfielder in an attacking sense, I'd say with the intensity and pressure that we're going to be facing today, it was too much of a risk to have him in there, because he does tend to wait for things to develop, whereas we need to be moving the ball fast today.
No, without a doubt. I mean, I don't think there was much in the way of, widespread criticism of the signing, Sean, on Acsom. But again, I always say people were a bit underwhelmed by it, but I could see that the thinking behind it. Ange knew the guy, played for him as an international player. He knew his attributes. He knew where he would fit in. I always look upon him as being a bit low maintenance. So, for example, he's played the game of his Celtic career the other night, and he's dropped. I mean, he's dropped for the Rangers game. I don't think he'll be chapping on doors tomorrow morning or at any point this week and questioning Angie's decision. I think he'll take it on the chin and move on, and if he comes on today, he'll show the same attitude and the same drive that we've seen in all the games. So I think he's a low maintenance type of player. San Fran Celtic, Maeda will make them empty their tank early again. Brilliant shout. I mean, the running that he does, and that's something that Ange picked up on after the Hibs game, the application, the attitude, the drive, the passion, all these different things. He's been called, many, many things this season, but I don't think he's a natural finisher, for example, a clinical finisher. And he was criticised for some of the misses, and then he comes up and scores probably the goal of the season, certainly a contender for goal of the season against Hibs the other night. 1969, Reaper Man, 3-0 to the Hoops. You reckon? So there's a bit of confidence flowing through these comment section. Stephen Bozic, trust in Ange, trust in the process. I think you do. I think you look at that team and you say, right, what's Ange's thinking here? Rather than saying that's a terrible lineup, you actually start to think, what is he thinking? And obviously, one of the big talking points is the fact that O'Reilly is in the midfield instead of Moy. Red Scotland comes in, needs to play as a Celtic player and not a lower league player as he has been of late. What do you make of O'Reilly's form recently, Sean? Because we gave him loads of credit when he moved into McGregor's position due to injury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it took him a few games to adjust to that number 6 position. And it's now taken him a few games to adjust back to being in the number 8. I think I mentioned earlier that I took a punt on Maeda. Well, I've doubled it up with O'Reilly as the other goal scorer for us today. So I do think he will come good at some point. He almost did during the week, and save other than a great David Marshall save, he would have. But yeah, even then, even though he did almost score midweek, he is kind of struggling to get a good flow to his game. I don't know if that's a confidence thing. I don't know if there's something else going on. But yeah, I was pretty sure that he was going to be sitting out in place of Moy today. But we trust in Ange and his whatever his reasoning is for making that decision today. He's definitely, O'Reilly's a great player. Might well be off form, but I think he's due to click.
Yes, and excuse me, I think the change of position may have affected his rhythm a wee bit. O'Reilly's first goal of the season. I spent the whole season last campaign talking about Starfelt getting his first goal of the season, and now it's been moved on to O'Reilly. What a time to open your goal scoring tally today. Martin talks about a £3 million buyout clause for Jens. No thanks. No difference between him and Welsh. There's talk that Welsh might be leaving the club. I'm sure we'll talk all about that during the January transfer window. And we've also got another good point coming in from Chris D. Sorry, but if you were them, then Abada and Jota scare them. They do, Chris, but you imagine being on your last legs and then you bring on Abada and Jota for the last 30 or 40 minutes. So I think it's a great weapon to have up your sleeve. We're 27 minutes into the broadcast. We're going to be wrapping it up after 29 so that we could pay our respects to Frank McGarvey. I've got to thank everybody for tuning in so far today. Over 700 live on the channel. If you haven't done so already, get yourself subscribing to A Celtic State of Mind. Our channel now gives you exclusive Celtic content. Anything else we get ourselves involved in will be on a separate channel. So all Celtic content on the channel. And whilst you're there, get yourself onto the Celtic Down Under YouTube as well and get subscribing to these guys. This content's all free. And we've got massive plans for 2023, as you always do, as well as the diet and the healthy eating and all that, cutting down on the bevy. You've got other big plans as well. Someone suggested in the comments section there about the fact that we've got so many contributors, Sean, that we should set up a wee 7-a-side team. Hey, by the way, that is a decent shout, and we might do something for charity with the Acsom squad, even though we have got members in far-flung places like Australia, Swindon and Japan. We might be able to pull that together. A couple of minutes or a minute to go. We're looking for predictions at the moment. I'm going to be bold, right, because I woke up this morning and I shot out of bed at 4 o'clock this morning, Sean. I don't know if it's a sign, but I'm thinking 4-0 Celtic. Are you going 2-0?
I'm actually not. I was listening to whatever radio phone in it is during the week, and it said, if you're a Celtic fan and you're not confident about this one, then you never will be. And I'm one of those ones who, having lived through so many past disappointments, I never will be. And I'm going to be the pessimist and say 1-1 and hope that I'm wrong and hope that we're celebrating a victory.
I do hope that we are. And again, sometimes I've got to check myself when you feel confident because, you then go into a game and it's tight. And as you say, it could be a draw. At the end of the day, Celtic will be top of the league after this 90 minutes. But let's turn the screw. Let's make it 12 points. Now, there is a 1 minute silence for the great Frank McGarvey. And we are going to respect that. And we're going to bring up a wee picture of Frank up. Everybody can pay their respects over the next minute or so, and then it's straight into the action. Thank you, every single one of you, for joining us on A Celtic State of Mind.